Okay, so the question is, what are we going to need to make this program? So obviously we need a button. Obviously we need this. And we're going to need something, I don't think we've seen it yet, called a message box, which we want to generate that message box when we, at a certain point in the program. In fact, when do we want that to come up? So we click here, and that's supposed to read what's in here. It's supposed to evaluate that, and if it's greater than 60, we want to announce that the student has passed. And we're going to use this message box technology to do that. That's not an object on the screen, so that you don't put an object on the screen to do that. You just write some code to generate the message box. And then after that message box is generated, if the score is greater than, what was it? No, sorry. If the score, then you want another message box to show up that will show how much improvement there was, if there was improvement. So we want to do all of that. So how are we going to do it? Okay, so let's double click on here. We have this subroutine and this subroutine. We're going to need to fill these in. Maybe, let's see. So actually, I think there's nothing that we have to put in here, but we have to put stuff in here. All right, so first of all, the way that you get a message box to show up is like this. Just type message box, and then you put what you want it to say. So you could just start out with something like this. You just test that out. Let's try it. Errors, didn't like it. Oh, sorry. I have to use message box. I'm not used to this. Anyway, to use message box.show, and now it should work. I think. Let's try it again. Message box. Did I spell it right? Give me this kind of message box error. But let's try it anyway. Okay, so it seemed to compile, and then I click here, and it does that. Okay, so that's how you run a message box. So we're going to want a message box, and that message box, have we done if then? I forget. Anyway, it's going to be inside an if then type of arrangement or code. So so only what? Let's write it like this first. So we're going to want to say if, I'm not writing Visual Basic here, so it's not going to like it, but I'm just going to say if what? If the score is, oops, I don't want to do that. If the score, I'll write it in quotes so it doesn't try to do anything. The score, this is not Visual Basic. If the score is greater than before, then we want, so we do, now, whenever you have an if statement, you should put the first part, what we call the antecedent, in parentheses, and then you write then, and then, of course it doesn't like this, and then we want the message box, message box dot show, and then we want to say something like improve from, and we have to somehow have the old value. So anyway, we want to write improved from, like that, quote, and then concatenate that with some variable that holds the old value. So I'll call it old value, but we don't have something called, in fact, I'll call it, instead of old value, I'll call it last score, but we don't have such a variable defined. In fact, we don't have any variables defined up here. So we're going to want something like that. And a score and then we want to say something like a string 2, space, and then the current score, which I'll just call score. So we're going to need another variable called score. Now, this doesn't make sense. I mean, this is not code. So, and then we'll want the end if. It's supposed to give us an end if, but we'll write it ourselves, end if like that. So that's just a small part of the code. And okay, so we have that so far. But that's just the logic for the second message box. Remember, the first message box says whether the student has passed or not. So we're also going to want a message box like here. We want to say something like student, or just, I think, what did it say? Passed? It just said passed, I think. Or no, actually it said student has. Student has. And then we want to put whether they passed or not. So we want something like a variable called grade, where grade is not the number, but the just whether they pass or not. So we want something like this. Okay. Now, when do we want, or how do we want that to show up? We want it to show up. Okay, no, we want that to show up in any case, but we need to set this grade. Or, yeah, we need to set this grade. So we're going to have to, so grade is going to be either passed or failed. And that's going to depend on the score that the student got. And score is going to come from the text box. So we want a variable called score. So let's start, or let's do dim score as integer. Let's do it as an integer. And then actually set it to basically, remember the name of the text box was txt score, and we're going to get the text value of that, and we want that to be an integer. Now there are different ways that we could convert to an integer. We just saw in the previous videos. So we're going to use this way, integer, like that, and here we're going to do, remember this, C type, like that. Remember this function? So you say what you want to convert and what you want it to convert to, and you use the C type function. So this is going to convert the text to an integer and store it in here in the score. So like if you type in 45, then in that text box as the grade, then it would store score in there, right? Okay, and that would be at the very beginning of the program. Now, what else do we need? So we want to say that if the score is greater than 60, then the grade is going to be passed. If it's less than 60, then the grade is going to be fail. So we'll use an if then else, or sorry, an if then else statement. Okay, so we'll do something like this. I'll just write it not as real Visual Basic code first. If score is greater than 60, then I'll just say passed right now, but it's not really passed. I'm going to do it like this. It's not going to like this, but passed. And then else failed. Right, that's the basic logic. Right? Like that. But the question is, now I want to assign grade to passed or grade to failed. So I'm going to now I could let's see, I'll put dim up here, and I'm going to make a variable called grade, and it's going to be a string. Okay, like that. And then I'm going to assign grade, which is a string, equal to passed here. And let's see if this works. And then grade equals to failed here. Right? Okay, now this didn't make any sense before. I said if score is greater than before, then message box show ... Okay, that's not Visual Basic code. So first of all, greater than, and score. Now score we have already defined here as an integer, so we can use it here, but we don't have before. And so score would be like this though. Score is greater than, and what does before mean though? Before means what, so we're running this program and what the student entered into that text box before. But we don't have any record of that because now the student has entered something new into the text box, right? So in other words, the student entered 40 into the next text box and they failed. And then the student enters 50. So what's in score now is 50, and we don't have any record of what was there before. So that's the problem. So how can we keep a record of what was in there before? So what we want is, we want to take this score here, and we don't want to keep overwriting it exactly, or we want to hold on to the previous value of it. So how can we do that? So we will make another variable. Let's call it dim last score. Okay. As also, this should be a integer. Okay. And we'll start it out as 0, and I'll initialize it here just at 0. Okay. And you saw that it was started out at 0 when I ran that program before anyway. So I initialize it to 0. And then what I want to use this last score for is to hold the last score. So you see, when we run the button again, score will get reset to the new value of what was in the text box, but I want to hold on to the older value. So I have to set score to last score. So suppose I put down here at the end, after I go through all this stuff with score, I collect the score. So the question is, where should I define? So I want to write something like this. Last score equals score, right? So I want to hold on to the current value of score so that when this gets run again, it will know the old score, right? Now what's the problem here? Well, let's think about it. So I run it. Let's see, should we think about it or should we run it? First, let's try and run it. Let's see what happens. Let's run it. Okay, it doesn't like it. What's wrong? So it says operator AND is not defined for type string. And okay, let's see what's that. So what's wrong with this? This text score is what? Doesn't have any meaning actually. So it doesn't like that. I meant to put not text score, but score, right? I want to say student improved from last score to new score to this score. So I want to write score there first of all. Let's try that and run it. Okay, now let's see if this works. So 45. Student has failed. Okay, that's okay. Now, and I don't care if it says improved or not because, well, let's see what happens. Okay, it didn't give the message box, and we got an error. And it says conversion from string before to double is not valid. So somehow I'm trying to convert here. So this is wrong, right? If score is bigger, so I'm trying to, score is an integer and it's trying to compare it with this, but that doesn't make sense. So what should this be? This is supposed to be before. But what is before? Before was last score. That's the logic, right? Okay. Let's see if that works. Well, I didn't mean that. I want to stop it and recompile it. Okay, I put in 45. Soon as failed. 0 to 45. Okay, that looks good. Okay, now let's make it 50. It's failed. Good. 0 to 50. No, that's wrong. And just okay, so it doesn't work. And this one more. Just suppose I put in 65. It's passed. At 0 to 65 again. It's 0. It didn't go from 0 to 65 though. So why is not that part not working from 0 to 65? So what is happening here? So let's see. Score comes from the text box. Grade is nothing at first. Last score is set to 0. And if score is greater than 60, we say grade becomes passed, else grade is failed. Then we do the message box. We show the student has this grade. And then we want another thing. We want to say whether if they've improved, we want to say how much they've improved. So we check if score is bigger than last score, then message box, and so if that is true, then we're going to say what the last score was and what the new score is. Okay, so when we start out, last score is set to 0, and then new score becomes something, and we compare it, and it works. It says last score improved from 0 to new score. Okay, now what happens? Now, like we said, we want to take the old score, the current score, and store it in the so-called last score, right? So that when we press the button again, it will have this last score, and then it'll be able to say what last score was, and it'll say last score to new score, and it'll work perfectly. Okay, so we do that. So we set our current score to last score so that it'll remember. Okay, then what happens? So as I said, we do this, put in a score, 55. Student has failed, went from 0 to 55. Great. And now I close this and I click this again. Well, I know I add a new grade to it, like 65. And I click this again, it says it's passed. And then I want say that the student improved from 55 to 65. But it doesn't. Why? Why is score 0? I'm sorry, last score 0. Why did that happen? Why did last score become 0? So this is the question. This is where I wanted to get to in this whole discussion. Why did the last score become 0? So think about it. Look at this. Why did last score become 0? I don't want it to be 0. I want it to hold on to the previous score, but it's not doing that. Why not? Because I set it equal to 0. When? When does this get set equal to 0? When the button is clicked again, this code runs again. What code runs again? This entire code from here to here runs again. So if that entire code runs again, then what happens? It's not remembering the last score because it resets it to 0. Okay, so suppose I didn't set it to 0. Maybe that would work. It's not a good idea to do that, but if you don't set it to anything, will it work? Can't delete it. Okay, so why did it do that? Why did it get set to 0? Because, as I just said, I don't know if I might not have gotten recorded, so I'm going to repeat myself here. I'm not sure if what I just said was recorded. So why did it not? Because what happens? Here, it sets it to, well, maybe it was 45. Then what happens? Then we click the button again. What happens? When you click the button again, this entire code gets rerun. But if this entire code gets rerun, what happens? This gets to here, this goes to here, and then this gets set to 0 again, so it forgets what I set it to. Okay, so maybe I could leave this out. Maybe I could just cut that out. Can I cut it out? Not letting me do that. Why not? Okay, so maybe it does that. Maybe this will allow me to do it. Let's see. Run it. 55. Okay. 0 to 55, that's okay. Then, let's see if it remembers. 75. Passed. No, it still doesn't remember. I don't know why it got to 0, but it didn't remember. Okay, I'm not even sure why it got set to 0, but it doesn't work because what's happening is that, I guess because we're declaring the variable again, even without setting it equal to 0, which you should do. You should set it to something in this case, but we're just redeclaring it, so who knows what it's going to equal. I guess it usually will be equal to 0, but you're not even sure about that. It could be equal to anything, really. So it's actually just equal to what happened to be in the memory location before, which could be anything random at all. So anyway, you don't want to do that. So how can we avoid this problem? How can we avoid this problem? How can we have it go to keep the old score? So this problem illustrates the issue of scope of a variable, the scope of a variable. So this variable, last score, gets deleted, or the program loses track of what it was. It doesn't hold on to the value. Okay? When we press the button again. Okay, that's because this variable is defined inside the button. So every time the button stops, after we run the button code once, the variable disappears. So what we need to do is put this variable definition somewhere outside of the button, outside of the button handler code. So what we need to do is put this outside of the button handler code. So we have to put it up here. So let's try that out. Try it again. 60, so they pass. That's not good. Oh, I guess it has to be 65. Okay, anyway, let's make it 70 now and see if it held on to the old value. Okay, now it holds on to the old value. Why is that? Because when I click the button, I'm not recreating that variable again. I'm not recreating last score, because last score gets recreated if it's in here. But it's not in there. It's up here. So it's being set in here, but it's being stored outside the button click or the button handler code. And so even when I re-click the button and I rerun this code, it doesn't redefine this last score. Okay, so then it should work. Okay. Now I do want you to change this code a little bit to the following, so you can study the following code to see how it's different. So I will give you, well, okay, let me just show you how I want it to change. I'm going to add a variable called message, and it's going to start out with equal to this string, first of all. And then if the grade is passed, I'm going to put this in there. Message concatenate equals. Now we studied this a little bit. We said plus equals and minus equals and so on. And we saw that basically what plus equals did was if I said plus equals 1, that would add 1 to this. So what this does is, if you think about it, it's concatenating grade to the message. Now message was student has, and then concatenated with that is going to be the grade. So this is going to say, this message is now going to say something like student has passed or student has failed, whatever it happens to be. So here in this, I'm not going to say student has anymore. I'm just going to say show the message. Okay, so that's a kind of nice trick. And you might want to look at this and understand it. Okay, it's not really any different than what we had, but it's a nice trick. And then I also have to fix this one. So I have to say same thing here. So now message will be student has failed if we're running this block of code. Okay, let's test it out and see what happens. So put in 65. Student has passed, 0 to 65. So the message works. Okay, and then 75. Student has passed, so the message works. And improved from 65 to 75. It's working. Okay, so this is the code, and make sure that you can understand this code. Now this video was very long, but make sure you can understand this code.